going on in your life, there's a pair of opposites. So if somebody's criticizing you, there's somebody praising you, but you're unaware of it. When you're conscious of the criticism, you're hurt and you feel angry. If you're conscious of the praise, you're pleased and you feel pleased. But if you see both of them at the other side, you realize that you're actually being given a moment of love. Love is a synthesis and synchronicity of complementary opposites. When you realize that that's all that goes on 24 hours a day, we have what is called a stream of consciousness, as William James says. And moment by moment, sliver by sliver, every billionth of a second or whatever, trillionth of a second, there's a sliver of conscious freezing, you might say. And we snapshot our reality and we gather information and we create what is called a neuroassociative complex in our brain from sensory input. We then associate it with previous experiences that we have. And we create this, you might call it a memory or a moment of perception. And in that moment, whatever the content of that perception is, the brain, in order to neutralize the chemistries because of the excitation of neurons, has to balance it, the chemistry, or otherwise it gets a runaway noise in the brain, a cascading of what they call brain noise. So what happens is the brain creates a composite opposite and becomes aware of the opposite. And when I finally realized that and I looked at that and I asked where it was, for 2 years I did it on myself, and I did hundreds and hundreds of cases, thousands of cases of moments in my life where I saw what was going on and where in my mind. And when I did cases in rape and beatings and torture and things of that nature, when I had clients that had gone through really, quote, traumatic experiences, I found out that they dissociated and created a composite opposite in their brain to counterbalance the chemistry in the brain in order to maintain homeostasis. And so they were dissociating. While they're being beaten, for instance, they would go and imagine themselves invincible. When they were in darkness, they'd see light. They'd feel like they're constrained. They'd see freedom and act like a bird or a butterfly or fly or something. And I watched these dissociative states. The content of the dissociative state was counterbalancing the state that they were experiencing in their so-called trauma. I also noticed in ecstatic drug use, the ecstatic would create paranoias of the opposite. And I realized that the mind is always maintaining pairs of opposites. When I discovered that and proved that, thousands of cases in my own life, and started then clinically working with clients, I discovered what I think is one of the greatest discoveries of human psychology. And we live in a zoology of psychology. It's a zoo. It's perpetrator, innocent victim model. And so we are separating causalities and blaming other people. And no therapy will ever be complete till cause equals effect in space-time. And so what happens is I went in there and identified exactly where it was, when it was, what it was, content, context, who it was due. And I looked for the other side and I found it every time. I found it was either real or virtual, but I found that it was complementary opposites. And man, I got tears of gratitude when I saw the same thing I got when I got with Leibniz when I was 18. And I just went, wow, this is too profound not to share. It's just too profound. And then I started clinically working with people with my method more and more. And I put it into the breakthrough experience where I began to teach people this. And the breakthrough experience I've done 1,107 times to try to get this message out to people, because people are caught in this fantasy and opium of, quote, self-improvement and get rid of half yourself and try to be one-sided in this moral constrained hypocrisy that we live in. And we subject ourselves to traditions and conventions that are antiquated and aren't really human behavior at its highest and finest. And when I finally put that into place and put that in the breakthrough experience, I watched transformations in people's lives. I saw people see things they never saw before. And all of a sudden, when they saw the pairs of opposites, their heart opened. And I realized that love is truly a synthesis and synchronicity of any complementary opposite. So whatever you perceive, the opposite's there. And when you're doing something to somebody, I looked again, and when you are mean to somebody, who is nice? When you are nice, who is mean? When you're rejecting somebody, who is wanting them? When you're stealing something, who is being generous? When you are generous, who is being stealing? I blew people's minds by making them aware and show them that their intuition always has that answer. We have what is called sensory awareness, then we have an intuitive noospheric awareness. And most people, I call it the immanent mind and the transcendent mind, or the lower mind and the higher mind, or the unreflective mind, or pre-reflective mind and the reflective mind, depending on who you want to read the writings of. And I realized that we have access to a vast amount of knowledge and can find the hidden order in the chaos. When I was 18, I also read Boltzmann's work and Einstein's on a Brownian movement. And I thought, he never was satisfied with the idea of it just random systems. I always believed that randomness was just not knowing all the variables and all the factors, as Pascal described in his work. So I basically sat there and I tried to find the hidden order in the apparent chaos. And by God, when I found 6 and 13, column 6 and 13 of the Demartini method, and I found these synchronistic opposites, I found a gold mine. And man, it's hard not to share that with people, because they run their life as victims of history instead of masters of destiny. They think there's chaos and their life is a burden, and they don't see life on the way, they see it in the way. But when I show them this, they realize there's nothing there out of order. They're graced. They have meaning. They find the meaning. The pairs of opposites join. And there's enlightenment. There's an aha. There's an inspiration. There's a metaphysical jump. There's a true spirituality. Spirituality is not a tribal thinking and not an anthropomorphism of some religious dogma that's antiquated, set up on Ptolemy's and Aristotle's view of the world with primal mobiles and things. That's antiquated. Spirituality has no race, creed, color, age, or sex limitations. It's transcendent. It has no local language, monoglottic constructs. It's massively more vast than that. And I feel that no matter what your background is and what your tradition is, there's a way now of discovering the magnificent intelligence of the universe, the panpsychic intelligence, the implicate order, as David Bohm would describe, in the universe, by asking the right questions. The quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you ask, because questions make you conscious of the unconscious. And then I went one step further on the next column, and I realized that as long as we were comparing our life to a fantasy of one-sidedness, we aren't going to appreciate our life. So I had to crack the fantasies and the nightmares that it was leading to. So what I did is I said, go to the moment where and when you perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating the specific trait in action that you admire or despise. Let's say despise. And at that moment, if they had done just the opposite of what you thought they did that you despised, and you had admired that, what would have been the drawback? And I make them go into that moment. So that's where the moment where their intuition can answer that question without speculation. And go in there, what would be the drawback? And when they answer that, they go to the drawbacks of that. They break the fantasy of how it could and should have been. Because the could, should, and would have beens or whatever is interfering with the way it is. Anytime you compare your reality to a fantasy how it should have been, you're not grounded in reality. What it is what it is. How does that serve you? How is what's happening right now fulfilling your life? Not how is it should be like it used to be, or it should be like I want it to be, or fantasize about it, but how does it work? By cracking the fantasies, which is column 14 in the Demartini method, and the nightmares, because when we're admiring somebody, if we're actually frightened of its opposite. If we found the benefits of the opposite, we not only dissolve the infatuation, because when we infatuate with people, we minimize ourselves and then try to live in their values and then self-depreciate. So infatuations are just as devastating to mastery of life as resentments. And both of them occupy your mind and run you.